Hi everybody, I just want to come on and do this quick live today. I've been getting a lot of feedbacks on my sessions recently about, do we have to use treats forever? Why are we using this? Aren't we rewarding the bad behavior by doing XYZ? So I just wanted to make a video for people to come to when we're trying to figure out what is actually reinforcing our dogs. So I'm going to run through a couple of things about reinforcement. And if you are a trainer, behaviorist, and I say something wrong, please correct me. But I'm going to kind of dive in here, okay? The biggest takeaway about reinforcement that anybody can take away from this video today is reinforcement is whatever is causing the behavior to happen again. So let's take the example of dog barking at mailman through window. They do it over and over and over again. Why? Because something about that loop of I'm doing my own thing, I hear something outside, I made eye contact with it, I barked, I chased it off. That is a reinforcing loop for that dog, for whatever reason. So if you're seeing repeated behaviors, good or bad, think about what is reinforcing those, okay? Now, reinforcement does not always mean food. Food is generally just the easiest way to translate it to our humans and to be consistent for our dogs. So there's food, water, space, and affection as the four kind of primary reinforcers I'll look at for a dog. Food, obvious, right? I think I've got videos on the different treat levels and when to use kibble and when to use other things. I've got a bag of Cheerios right here behind the video. So picking the type of food, that's its whole little rabbit hole you can follow, okay? If we're going to use space, now space is one that always surprises my humans, but when we're using space, it's generally for a dog that is coming from a place of fear. So a dog that is, for example, leash reactive. If the root cause of why they're barking is to create distance, then the reinforcing loop can start with just giving them a different button to get space, right? Because a lot of the times when you're starting with these guys that are super scared, they won't eat food. You step out the door and they're done. So treating it as space instead of food as an initial reinforcer is a great way to get the training session flowing, okay? So specifically also when dogs are meeting new people, right? It's really common for us to have them loose around the house and they're going all over the place, barking, going nuts. For example, the session I had today where great with people if they're sitting down. If that person goes to stand up and walk away, we get the cheap shot barking and snapping at the feet, all of the aggressive outbursts. But not putting teeth on any skin, not going full Cujo, not trying to hurt anything. So that tells us that the dog is just trying to create space, make some sort of predictable loop happen around something that is unpredictable, i.e. the child moving is unpredictable. But when I bark and lunge, my humans do XYZ, and space is created by XYZ. So for some dogs, barking and lunging becomes the button they press to get their human to give them space, if that makes sense. So food, space, water, right? Water is not one that I recommend using frequently as far as like withholding or giving it, but it is important to think about when you have a dog that resource guards and or when you're trigger stacked. So if a dog has been outside all day and is hot and panty, specifically like the bulldog breeds, where it's already hard for them to breathe, and then they come inside and they're greeted by another dog or another guest and they're trying to drink water, let them just have that. That is a very large reinforcer at that time. So making sure that you pay attention to that, right? For some dogs, pool in the backyard is a huge resource because they're going to guard it. It's their enrichment zone. It's XYZ. So remember that water is a reinforcement, and a lot of the times if the dog doesn't know how to access water or it doesn't have frequent access or constant access to water, it can become a little bit tricky. So you can also use water reinforcement for dogs that like water out of the hose. For example, Kimmy over here. We use the water play as part of her engage, disengage, as part of her, words, lost them. Her impulse control training. That's the word. So, for example, I think I've got some videos up in the group, but if I'm spraying something this way and I don't want her playing with it, she gets a weight. And then the reward for waiting is playing with the hose. Now, side note, if you're letting your dogs play with the hose, make sure you're not shooting it down their face. They can have after drowning, so being very careful about how you're shooting the water and how long you're letting go in their face. But if your dog is motivated by water, use that as a reinforcer. My Rottweiler loves ice cubes. So that is an easy treat for her, okay? So our reinforcers function as the thing that's the payday to make a behavior continue happening, okay? Now, that payday can be affected and can change based on learning history, right? So if I have a dog who has a learning history of, I get the reinforcement, I get food, but right after food something scary happens, then that food loses its value because it's predicting another thing happening. So making sure that the learning history around whatever food you're offering is very clear. Some dogs will get to the point where if you think Jade's dog, Charlie, if she leaves the house with hot dogs, Charlie knows exactly what kind of training they're going to be doing that day. So based on the reinforcement available, your dog can understand automatically what's going on. Marshall's case, right? When we had him getting used to the other family member, that person was the only person with the special salmon treats. That way we could control all of the learning history with this brand new food item, okay? So the learning history with the context, the actual reinforcer, all affects the learning history, which in turn makes the reinforcement and the loop start over again, okay? So there's also a debate, it happened on one of my posts actually, about how big of a treat you should be giving. Now, the size of the treat versus the rate of reinforcement is usually where I find the biggest impact, okay? So I'm one to usually opt for tiny treats frequently versus a large treat. It's a little bit clearer, I've got more control of it, and it creates more of a quick lick and look at me. When you're giving them a big treat, or for example, peanut butter on a walk, think about eating crackers on a run. I'm not going to want to work for very long. So thinking about what type of food you're offering is going to be important when you're looking at the size. If I'm offering wet treats, I can offer more. I can offer bigger if I want, a couple of licks, versus dry treats, freeze-dried minnows, for example. I'm going to give just a little bit of that, okay? Now, when I say rate of reinforcement, I mean how fast the dog is getting it. So we have option 1, which is you get a treat for every time you do the thing I ask you to. Sit, here's your food. Sit, here's your food. That is a regular rate of reinforcement based on behavior. When we start moving into more of the behavior work and we start trying to create patterns and getting our dogs to pay attention to us, then we can control our rate of reinforcement and get different behaviors. So, for example, I'll have my humans commit to 30 seconds. And for 30 seconds, every 5 seconds, you're going to walk to a specific spot and put a piece of food down and walk away. And wait. And walk back, put the food down, and wait. And then at the end of the 30 seconds, you're going to watch your dog. If the dog looks like, why aren't you going back to that spot? Then you can go and put it back down. If the dog is not anticipating, you wait another 30 seconds and you start over again, right? So we can use the rate to get the dog going into a working brain, right? Helps a lot with transitions as well. So you can go in and out of a room and that can predict things. You can have your guest put food down on a certain spot and walk away. Any type of predictability helps, especially when we're dealing with the rate. Now, when you're teaching a new behavior, specifically to a dog that doesn't have a good learning history or has a super low frustration threshold, those guys, you want their rate of reinforcement to be like every second. So you want to set up where they are winning for everything at the beginning before you ever start fading the treats out. And a lot of times what happens is my humans will fade the treat out too soon, which is why the dog only listens when your food is present, right? So we start with a high rate, and then from there you can transition to intermittent, so only every third, so the dog is always guessing. That works for really resilient dogs. You can also reward only for perfect, so each time they get closer to what you're actually looking for, that's what you'll be rewarding. But if your dog isn't used to working with you, I am a huge fan of quick rate of reinforcement, go take a break. And do that same routine in a different place of your house. And start the foundation of follow me with the food, now we can work. And then the food part fades out because you're offering the guidance. And you become the reinforcer, right? That's why clicker training works. Eventually the dog gets to a point where the click itself is reinforcing, right? If you've done a lot of training with your dogs, you can do fake treats. I'm sure you guys have seen videos of people offering their dog fake treats and the dog is super excited. because there's such a built-up learning history of a high rate of reinforcement, okay? So that's generally my go-to. If I have a dog who's new to learning, new to training, they get a really high rate of reinforcement, and if they have a low frustration threshold. So we lower what our expectations are, and we increase how fast we're giving them treats. Remember, dogs are like toddlers. They will always pick 10 pennies over a $100 bill. They will always pick the bigger pile, okay? And if you don't know what kind of food is reinforcing to your dog, set out a couple of plates. See what they go for. Let them pick their ABCs of what their treat hierarchy looks like, okay? It doesn't have to be treats. It can be banana chips. It can be celery. It can be cucumbers. It can be all kinds of stuff. So rate versus size makes a big difference when you're working with them. For example, if, on another note on the size, if I'm having them chew on a hot dog, well, then I have to wait longer between asking them things, right? Because if they're still chewing on the last reinforcer and I say, okay, now sit, and they don't sit right away, but they're still getting rewarded, it gets really muddy and messy, right? So you want them to completely finish the reinforcement, stop, and either look back at you or go back to whatever other behavior you're working on before you ask for the next thing. So that's another win for small reinforcers versus the larger reinforcers, is your loops can be tighter and much more clear. Okay, context is really important. A context in itself can be reinforcing, or with the learning history, it can be bad. For example, I can make a greeting protocol reinforcing with the right food. My dogs only get Cheerios when XYZ happens, but if that training, if those hot dogs only come out during scary things and your timing is wrong, you're going to send it the other way, right? Common example of that is with the Look at That games, where my humans say, well, I've always tried to give them foods. They won't eat it. Okay, you wait until the dog notices the environment, then you give them food. If you are seeing the dog in the distance and pulling out a hot dog, again, now hot dog is predicting a dog in the environment, a stressor. Okay, so being very careful about what context you're in and remembering that dogs are picture learners. So they don't generalize well. Start in one space, make it really good before you try and take them outside, before you try and take them out to a park and do the same behaviors, okay? And remember, we also train emotions into this, so if you've got a vibrating sit, understand that you're getting that high level arousal built up wherever you take that sit. So really make sure that when you're building your foundations, you have a high rate of reinforcement, so we have low frustration, so that we have nice calm behaviors, and then we can generalize those easier. I hope this is making sense. Clear goals are super important. And when I say clear goals, I don't mean I want my dog to be friendly with other people. That's a lengthy, faraway goal that, of course, everybody wants their dog to be friendly with people. But a closer goal, something that's a little bit more measurable, would be something along the lines of, today, during this session, I hope that 3 times my dog looks at me. Check the box if your dog looked at you 3 times that session. Start really low, that way the human and the dog get the right amount of reinforcement. Because if you go out and do a training session, cooperative care is a really good example. If you sit down to do a cooperative care training with those like nail trims and stuff, with the goal of, I'm going to clip this whole foot, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to rush the system, and everything's going to fall apart. So then it's just a negative loop for everybody. Whereas instead, if you approach those types of sessions as, okay, today we're going to do it for this whole cheese stick, and I'm going to see if I get less intensity. I'm going to see if I can grab the elbow before I get a flinch. Start way back there, and then build up, okay? And remember, when we're changing context, we are lowering our expectations, increasing management, all right? Delivery type and location are also really important when it comes to reinforcers. So Hannah Brannigan, I love the way she talks about it, because she says it's either takeout or delivery. So you can have a dog in a stay, and if that dog is only trained to get reinforcement out of your hand, then when you say good or yes, that dog is going to pop out of that stay and come get their food. Whereas if you build a good or a delayed reinforcer, a duration cue, then they'll know to wait because the food is coming to them, right? When I'm working reactive dogs, we talk a lot about not shoving food in their face and instead offering it back behind us and a target specific every single time. That way they get bonus points of it's the same system, so that is comforting, and I'm not chasing them. There's a lot more agency involved in come find this. okay? Plus, we want our dogs in a seeking mindset to help them get through any of their frustration or anxiety spaces. So, delivery type and location. The more clear my human can present that from the jump, the better it is on the dog. If you want your dog to take food only out of a green bowl, use that green bowl every training session and put everything in there for your dog to naturally go get, okay? And when you're generalizing and fading, everybody does differently, but fading to a more intermittent reinforcement strategy is usually the best way to solidify any of your obedience behaviors out in the wild. So intermittent reinforcement means, think about like gambling. Sometimes you get this, sometimes you get that, and sometimes you get a big, big payout. So you just slowly start fading out the little bits and you start doing payouts only once. Or you have to go at their rate. If you're seeing your dog's behavior, they're not able to achieve what you're asking, increase your rate of reinforcement, bring them back. Increase your management so they can't make poor choices. And try again in like 2 weeks, not the next day, okay? If you get into a pattern of, I'm going to reinforce you, and when I start pulling out food and you stop listening, I'm going to offer you more, well, now not listening is getting reinforced. So be very careful that if you're going to start doing the intermittent reinforcement, you're committing to either every third time or every third to fifth time, or I'm going to give a jackpot, which is like a bunch of them. You can either hand deliver it one at a time or make a pile. I like doing it hand deliver one at a time. Again, it makes them feel like it's more, and I have more control of that. So when you're doing a jackpot, you can control that, right? Maybe I just do a jackpot once in the middle for a dog that knows a good recall, but that one time he happened to hear a bird or saw a squirrel, I'm going to pay out for that really strongly. And I want the dog to know there is always payout available. It just might look different as the dog ages, okay? So that's the general how to use reinforcers, what they are, the complicating factors behind them. So if you have any questions, if you're running into any problems, this didn't make sense, let me know in the comments. We love to come back through these and answer them. I'll also be doing a video feedback on Justina's video, or I'm sorry, I already did one, on Pamela's video for Katie, the Amstaff. She does a bunch of awkward play. So it's a really good example of a dog who missed their socialization window and is doing retrospective, right? They're trying to learn how to play after the fact. So those guys can be a little awkward and hard to read. So if you first decrease the frustration to the barrier and decrease the novelty bit, then you can use management like fences, like leashes, to engage them in safe play. But first, before you can get to that, you have to make those spaces safe, which is why the reinforcers are important, okay? So I just wanted something for you guys to hop on and see. If you have any questions, again, let me know. I'm also going to do a quick version of this on TikTok. We have a TikTok now. I'm going to do the thing. I'll let you guys know how that goes. And then, yeah, the voting closes also for the Hot Topic Live. So make sure you guys, it's up on the featured. Click that and make sure you're voting, okay? It's nice to see everybody. Have a great day. Bye.